Now, head teachers in England have been told they shouldn't refer to pupils by their gender, as any negative stereotypes could be bad for mental health. They were also told not to use gendered terms like girls or boys, as there may be transgender people in the room. So, our talking point this morning is, should we use gender-neutral language in the classroom? Well, with me to discuss this is writer and LGBT campaigner Jane Fay, and from our Central London studio, the assistant editor of Spiked Online, Ella Whelan. Good morning to both of you. Jane, let me start with you. Is it wise to use gender-neutral pronouns at all times in the classroom?
Absolutely not. And let me be very, very clear, because I spoke to Natasha Devon last night. She didn't say that.
Now, she's the person
she is the person who is alleged to have said this.
Head teachers.
And what is happening, and I'm afraid this boils down, she's talking about bullying and how we need to respect individuality and respect individual choices. And what is coming back over and over from the mainstream press and from sort of minor magazines like Spiked is pure bullying. It is simply not being said. Nobody is saying that you mustn't say boys and girls. All that Natasha said in an hour-long piece is respect people. Use careful language. Don't use terms like man up, because that's possibly bad for boys. Don't put girls down. Don't use anti-gay language, and be mindful, if you possibly have a trans child there, be mindful of that. But she never said, don't use boys or girls.
OK, let's put that to Ella Whelan then. Ella, it's all about making headlines, perhaps, and bullying, according to Jane.
First of all, I don't think it's bullying to want to have a discussion about the nature of transgender politics, which has become a big talking point, I think, for good and bad reasons. I think it's important to remember that while perhaps Natasha Devon's comments have been sort of taken out of context, there is instances in which teachers are penalised. There's a teacher in Oxfordshire who's currently under investigation for allegedly misgendering a pupil in which he said girls. So there is a conversation being had about whether schools should be using gender-neutral language. I'd personally have absolutely no problem with the term man up. I think most teachers have a lot on their plate when it comes to teaching kids. You know, it's a very busy job. You also don't become a teacher if you dislike kids. Being a teacher is about loving children, wanting to educate them, wanting to have the best for them. So we need to just kind of cool it a bit and realise that actually most of the time, 99.9% of the time, teachers have kids' best interests at heart, will be decent and kind people, but to impose this kind of stuff on them is absolutely wrong. It's censorious.
You are aware that the maths teacher who is under discussion said that it was an accident, but had he known, he felt he ought to misgender this child anyway. That is bullying. And Ella, this is not about having a discussion. Natasha Devon is absolutely clear she was not talking about transgender children. She was talking about treating all children with respect.
OK, let me put this to you then, Jane. If a head teacher of a girls' school goes into assembly in the morning and she stands up on the stage and she addresses the whole school and says, good morning, girls, today we're going to talk about X, Y or Z, do you think that is wrong?
I think it depends upon circumstances. This came up a few weeks back. Again, the press monstered. And let me be very clear what's happened to Natasha Devon. She's clear she didn't say what she's alleged to have said. She has had rape threats, she's had death threats. This is bullying. And quite frankly, the head teacher, let me get back to the head teacher. The head teacher said, because this was accused of a particular head teacher, she never said that. If she was dealing with a specific pupil who she thought or had reason to believe was not gender conforming, she would use her language carefully. But otherwise, it depends on some head teachers will go in and say, hi there. What's wrong with that? Some will say, students. Some will say, where is the problem?
That is an issue, isn't it, Ella? That actually there are lots of other words you could use that aren't going to patronise anyone, that aren't going to offend anyone, that are just going to be used in normal, everyday situations, like pupils, like students. What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that. I think what the problem is that we're telling people to panic about the kind of language that they're using. There is absolutely nothing wrong with calling girls girls. Okay,
only person
there is
saying
absolutely.
panic.
Hang on, can I speak, Jane? Sorry.
Go on.
There
Go
is
for it.
absolutely nothing wrong with saying that. And I think what we're in danger of doing with this, I really think, overblown panic about gendered language, is to make people feel cautious about that. You know, to kind of feel a tut-tutting behind them when they speak. It's a really censorious kind of thing. And when it comes to kids, I mean, what we should be talking about with kids is letting them be as free as they possibly can. And if we're kind of continuously worrying about gender, double thinking what we're saying to them, rather than just teaching kids this kind of, you know, the subject, what you're meant to be learning at school, not worrying about girls and boys and man up, and I think, frankly, all of this rubbish, it's extremely important to note that the majority of teachers, unless they're kind of horrible people, will not want to make their students feel bad and will accommodate people because the relationship between a teacher and their pupils is very strong, and for good teachers it will be a very positive one. So just kind of, can we just cut to the real thing here and say that we don't have a kind of epidemic of misgendering in schools, but what we are doing is we're telling people what they can and can't say, and as you know, Spike believes in free speech, and I do, and that is very worrying.
OK, I'm afraid we are out of time. Ella Whelan from Spiked Online and Jane Fay, writer and campaigner. Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.